It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's DD Ash, and this week we're playing Super Robot Taisen, Mini-Putt, Sumo Fighter, Nintendo World Cup, and Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle 2. Let's start the show.
Dramatic Simulation 第2次スーパーロボット対戦ワンプレスト
Super Robot Taisen DMG-SZJ, developed by Winkysoft and published by Banpresto. BattleBots Activate. Super Robot Taisen is a pretty fleshed out series of games at this point, with a ton of entries. Super Robot Wars 30 came out as recently as 2021 on Switch, PS4 and PC. But this is the glorious turn-based strategy game that started it all. Unfortunately, it comes hot on the heels of the first Little Master game, which came out literally the day before this, so it's already got a pretty accomplished contemporary to contend with. Still, Robot Wars the TV show was the bomb back in the day, so let's give it a go. The story goes that the space monster Kajillion has invaded the super robot homeworld, with many succumbing to his thrall. However, a brave and strong few kept their resilience and fought back. Choose from one of 3 squadrons at the start of your game. The first one is Gundam, which brings back some pretty squeamish memories. Fortunately, this is not that. Even so, I went with Mazinger, more out of principle than anything. Each team has 5 initial members, and their stats vary a little, so experiment to find what you prefer. Once you pick your team, you need to choose which of the 4 is to be the hero, the main character. You can allocate 5 bonus stat points to whomever you choose, so play about with it. The fog of war is quite impactful when you start an episode. It's really difficult not only to know where your enemies are, but also how big the map is, or what general direction to head in. This really should have been more forgiving. The main selling point of games like this is how well you are able to strategize your attack. The genre is literally called strategy, and the lack of the ability of foresight unfortunately hampers the game too much. If you come across towers, make an effort to land one of your troops on it, as these will grant you weapon or armor upgrades. Once you do get into the meat of a battle and the 2 forces have joined, it's actually a pretty strong rendition of a strategy game. You have several choices per character as to what attack you can use. They all have different strengths and ranges. After any attack, there is a retaliatory strike. The land bonuses, obstacles apply, and so on. Unlike most strategy games, the aim here is not necessarily to wipe out the enemy or kill the boss. The enemy forces are guarding towers, and it's your job to overthrow them. Kinda makes it seem like you're the one doing the invading, but whatever. You can enlist enemy units to fight for you if your persuasion stat is high enough. A cool mechanic that I forget exists around 99% of the time. This is the main way to bolster your squad, and you can have up to 12 units at any one time. There is another mechanic called Spirit, and is something only available to your hero character. In later versions of Super Robot Taisen, this was available to all the characters, but here it's just your main. Spirit commands usually are used to massively strengthen your characters by increasing their attack, defense, or agility, that sort of thing, and are best used when you're readying for the final push of taking out the much stronger tower guards. We're in a very similar territory to Little Master from a page or so back. I could talk endlessly about this game as it's that good. Which one I prefer is meted out in the scores I've given them, but the similarities are many. Both Japanese exclusives with many comparative game elements. You'll need to patch the ROM files to get the most out of the games, unless you're fluent in Japanese. Where they are most similar is that they're both bloody brilliant, and I encourage any strategy fan to give them their due. We might be finding a really successful little niche of the Game Boy library here, and I am so here for it. Mini-Putt DMG-V3A, developed and published by A-Wave. What do you want to know about Mini-Putt? It's literally what it says, a no-frills game of crazy golf. You can select normal, game, or gamble. The difference being, normal is scored by the usual par system. Gamble, you place wagers, and the one with the lowest score wins. Pick how many players you want, 1 to 4, then the course difficulty. Choose from easy, normal, hard, or special. Each 9-hole course is different. No hole is repeated, to the game's credit. Move your cursor to the place you're aiming at, and there's a little number underneath the power bar. This is the distance from the ball that you've put the cursor. If you can match the power bar to something close to that, your shot will reach pretty close to where you're aiming. This is useful for the shots closer to the hole, where you don't want to put too much power on it. The harder part is the left and right swing. It's very difficult to hit this much smaller bar dead center, meaning your shots will be skewed quite often. As long as you're not too far wide, it's pretty generous and doesn't affect the trajectory too greatly. There are arrows on the course. These signify where the slopes are. The darker the ground around the arrow, the steeper these slopes, and the physics are pretty accurate. A couple of minor flaws. The par scores for the majority of the holes are way too low. Some of them even demand that you get it in one. But unless you care about such things, it doesn't affect the game in any way, especially if you're playing against a friend. Secondly, there's no way to time when your guy hits the ball, meaning the opening and closing door obstacles really just boil down to a hit and hope kind of thing. You can't anticipate when they'll be open unless you're Rain Man and can make those sorts of calculations on the fly. To be honest, it's crazy golf and wasn't meant to be taken too seriously. You'll probably enjoy this if you're at all into daft games of skill. Sumo Fighter DMG-SF, developed by Kid and published by IMAX in Japan and DTMC in North America. Help, help! Yep, another damsel has been kidnapped. This time, you're a sumo wrestler. Moving swiftly on then. For such a massive Rikishi, the fellow's pretty soft. You take damage really easily from the mindlessly approaching enemies, with little invulnerability between hits. Timing is key. You jump with the A button, the height of which is determined by the length of time you hold the button. B does your palm attack thing, which turns into a shoulder toss, causing your aggressors to comically fly off the top of the screen. I mean comical as a synonym for farcical. There's not much amusing about it. The price of this cart alone means that I don't have the manual, and probably never will, so it took me a good while to realize that double tapping a direction causes your fighter to run. There are certain spikes and pits you can't cross without doing a running jump. I messed up a ton, so you don't have to. You're welcome. So, in my moment of slightly embarrassed curiosity, I tried out other button combinations too. It turns out you have more than just your simple palm attack. Double tapping a direction and pressing B is a headbutt. Up and B, in good old Castlevania style, fires this hand projectile that you can collect. The gauge on the bottom tells you how many of these you have left. These are alright, if not much more powerful than your usual attack. The one that is really useful, however, is the sumo stomp thing. Apparently it's called a shiko. You can do this by pressing down and A. This stuns certain enemies and kills others. It's particularly useful against those little ones that are hard to hit. There are 5 areas, each with 3 levels and a final boss. You have health points in the game, which are replenishable by eating the foodstuffs that enemies sometimes drop. Beside the HP gauge is an experience points one, which tells you how many EXP you have and how many you need to level up. There are 3 aspects to power up: your hand attack power, your stomp power, and your health. Boosting your attack power is probably the most important, as this not only governs your strength, but what blocks you can break open. Later on, there are some blocks that those with a low attack level aren't strong enough to break, and you'll miss out on lots of food drops and experience points. The foot stomp isn't very useful to power up, as the regular one can take care of most enemies in the game. An upgraded one can be useful against some bosses, but you certainly don't need it. Focus on the hand attack primarily, with occasional health boosts. I like the way the game looks. The backgrounds are nice, if a little generic, and the enemies are varied, if a little strange. The Japanese-style music fits the theme, obviously, and has a nice pace to it that sounds like something you could punch a smaller man in the face to. The timing of the controls takes a smidge of work to get used to. You'll find that when attacking an enemy, you often take damage yourself too, but it's just a case of getting the timings down. Sumo Fighter is not a bad game at all, but it clearly didn't convince the Western audience too much, as a North American cartridge is pretty rare, and as a result, way overpriced. You're looking at a good $40 at least for the game pack alone. Trust me when I tell you that it's probably not worth it. You can get a Japanese one for way less, and there's no text to read anyway. I bought a US one though. Of course I did. I'd see a therapist about my ridiculous obsession, but between this, Cool World, and Shaq Fu, I can't afford one. Nintendo World Cup DMG-NC. Developed by Technos Japan and published by Technos Japan in Japan and Nintendo in North America and Europe. NES fans are sure to know this one. One of the most popular sports titles on that system turns out to be the best one yet on this system. You select from 13 teams, not at all based on the lineup for Italia 90. There's no Austria, Scotland or Romania, amongst others, and France are present despite not actually qualifying for that finals. Your squad is made up of 6 generically named players that could be considered archetypical of the country that you've chosen. For instance, Arthur is the English goalie and Pierre is holding down the French midfield. You only have one formation to choose from, but you can pick which player plays where, and some rudimentary strategies such as whether to focus on passing or dribbling, or whether your teammates shoot at all. This was a little strange to me the first time I saw it, but then you realise that you only control one player on your team. The other 5 are automated. Games like FIFA do actually have this as a game option these days, but back then it was not the norm. The 6 players on your team line up with 1 keeper, 2 defenders, 1 midfielder, and 2 strikers. This is your only choice, and also P1 only has the option of controlling number 4, the midfielder. This is who you want, as it's not as though positional play is super important. I find myself playing the box-to-box method popularized by primary school kids anyway. Ooh, ball, chase it. Depending on which team you choose and which lineup you go with, the players are faster or slower and have varying chances to win the ball back in a tackle. While these stats aren't shown anywhere, it's quite a marked difference, with Germany being the top guys, fair enough, and Cameroon being the weakest. Roger Miller might have had something to say about that. The game is horizontally focused, with the famous Kunio-kun style of character made famous by Double Dragon and River City Ransom. You know, the ones with the big old craniums? The characters all look slightly different, mainly just the eyes or hairstyles, but it's a nice touch. I love the facial expressions when a player gets tackled. They actually look as if they took a right hook from Jimmy Lee. You can't see the whole pitch at any one time, even widthways, but it works here as you can usually at least see a teammate to pass to, or a couple of opposition players. You pass with A and shoot with B, and while the other team is on the ball, A will shoulder charge and B will attempt a slide tackle. I guess you could say that your controllable number 4 is the team captain, as while the other players are autonomous, you can shout at them to block or slide tackle when defending by pressing the same buttons you'd use to do so yourself, and pass or shoot similarly while attacking. This is cool, and the other guys actually do respond to you with some degree of intelligence. If bearing down on goal, they're not going to pass to you regardless of how many times you scream for it. Just position yourself for a potential rebound and shut your mouth, you dirty glory stealer. It's possible to activate a player's special shot by pressing A and B together. These include bicycle kicks and volleys that are very tough to save, but you only get 5 per match. As you progress through the teams, the pitches change with some pretty funny additions. For instance, when you play Japan, there are boulders that instantly trip a player. There are sandy pitches that slow the balls down, and icy ones that hilariously cause a tackled player to skid off the pitch. Nice touches. And there we have it, one of my hopes fulfilled. A soccer game that's really fun and playable. The lack of realism really helps. The game is totally lawless. Feel free to take out your opponents from behind or elbow them to the head, whatever you want. Oh yes, you have no idea how happy this game makes me. Get in! Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle 2 DMG-BY, developed by Kotobuki Systems and published by Kemco in Japan and North America and Laguna in Europe. Honey Bunny has been kidnapped by an evil witch, and it's up to you to... forget it. This time you must collect 8 keys on each level, of which there are 28 in total, in order to open a door at the end. Often keys are in plain sight, dictating the path you need to take. Just as often, however, you need to go into a room, an unlocked one at that, walk along a little bit, collect the key, and walk back out. You gotta love that tacked-on longevity, right? Trying to stop you are the traditional roster of Looney Tunes characters. You have a limited number of strategically placed weapons, such as bombs or a bow and arrow, to take them out, but don't waste them. If there's an alternative way to pass an enemy, use it, as later on you'll get assaulted from all sides by the bastards. It's often a good idea to stand at the bottom of a stairwell and wait for an enemy to use them. Crossing on the stairs doesn't kill you, and is often the only way to pass through certain sections. As before, you get an extra life per every level you beat, but if you die, you need to restart the level, including collecting all the keys. There seems to be less choice in your paths. You tend to start at the bottom, working your way linearly to the top, occasionally detouring into these silly little key storage cupboards. There are the same pipes and jump pads, as well as ropes that help bugs bridge gaps. There are now also teleportation pads that take you from one spot to another, but it's all predetermined and isn't really anything other than a prettier way of following a straight line. I still don't get why you would choose Bugs Bunny as the protagonist of a game where you can't jump, but I guess some things just aren't meant to be understood. The graphics are good, but let's be frank, they're recycled from the previous game. Kinda lazy, but then sequels do that all the time. The music is fine, if repetitive, but the thing that'll stick with you like a tick is that "you collected a key" noise. Is there a more annoying soundbite on the whole system? 8 times per level per life? Oh, you cruel, cruel people. Remember how the first Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle game was called Mickey Mouse in Japan? This one is called Mickey Mouse 2 over there. That makes sense, right? Well, in Europe, this one, the sequel, was simply called Mickey Mouse. Not Mickey Mouse Magic Wands, which is something different again. Why do they do this? Did they not consider the sanity of the retrospectively minded reviewers 30 years in the future? Thank Christ for DMG codes, that's all I'll say. Also, as if there weren't enough incarnations of this game, it underwent a sprite swap and was repackaged as Hugo in 1996. Just the sprites though, literally everything else is exactly the same. For a game that's already quite lazy in the first place, this is a fact that leaves a bitter taste in its wake. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/portablepowerpodcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.